What is going on, everyone? My name is Jason, and this is the iPhone 13 mini. So it's been about 3 months since Apple debuted their second iteration of what will likely go down as one of the most polarizing iPhones of all time, the love it or hate it iPhone 13 mini. Now, to illustrate just how divided people are about this tiny phone, I recently asked you guys whether or not you would ever buy the 13 mini for yourselves, and the results are pretty telling. Some of you absolutely love this charming device, others not so much. And that no doubt is representative of how the general public feels about both the 12 and 13 mini, aptly illustrated by the significantly weaker sales volume when compared to the non-mini iPhone variants. Now, I've been very vocal about my own personal affinity towards this particular smartphone, and I still firmly believe that the people that are most against the mini iPhones have actually never used them before. That said, I'm also super empathetic, and I totally understand why folks would be turned off by this form factor, even though I genuinely believe this is a great phone. So today I want to talk about the specific reasons why most people will never buy the iPhone 13 mini, while at the same time maybe busting some of the myths that are driving those reasons to help you be as informed as possible about this polarizing device. Now, before we jump into the review, in case you're new here, I'm Jason. I would really appreciate it if you take a quick second and press that thumbs up button. It really does help out solo creators like myself get a little bit more traction on their videos, so please help a brother out. And in case you're a tech junkie like me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date with all the reviews. And real quick, before I jump into it, what are your personal thoughts on the iPhone 13 mini? Curious to get your thoughts. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comments down below. Okay, the first reason why most people are never going to buy the iPhone 13 mini is kind of an ironic one, as it's mainly Apple's fault. Now, to expand on that, Apple debuted the 13 mini alongside the new iPhone 13, 13 Pro, and 13 Pro Max, which makes sense from a product launch perspective, but I think that inadvertently put the 13 mini in prime position to be overlooked. When introduced side by side with each other, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that the regular size item is quote unquote better and more worth it than the smaller version, even though that mindset is primarily driven by stereotypes. And I really think that the mini versions of the iPhone would do better if they're launched separately from the main lineup, kind of like how Apple did the updated version of the iPhone SE. That allows the phone to get more of that dedicated spotlight, which would help drive home the intrinsic value that this form factor brings, rather than it being overshadowed by 3 other phones that are larger in size. Now, another component that I think exacerbates this problem is the way that the 13 mini is priced. The base model starts off at $699, which I've always said is pretty reasonable considering that you're really not conceding much of anything when it comes to the phone's core performance. But with it being only $100 cheaper than the base model regular 13, I think most people will shell out a little bit more dough, play it safe, rather than go with the 13 mini, even if they're genuinely kind of interested in it. Plus, Apple is also offering the base model iPhone 12 at the same price as the 13 mini right now, and moreover, for those who know they want a smaller phone, Apple also offers the new iPhone SE that comes in with a base price of $399, and I just feel as though all those options further cannibalize the 13 mini sales. Now, in my opinion, the 13 mini is leagues better than the new SE in virtually every way, and there's a strong argument to be made that it's also better than the regular iPhone 12. And that's why I think that if the phones were priced lower, say like $599, and was marketed independently as the mid-tier iPhone, it would do so much better. But right now, with so much internal competition, it's really easy for the 13 mini to fall off people's radar. Now, the second reason why people are never going to buy the iPhone 13 mini is much more of a straightforward one, and that's because it's legitimately small. And I've always been one not to sugarcoat this aspect of the phone because, in my opinion, I would classify it as abnormally tiny. This is one of the only new phones out there right now that I can easily wrap my fingers around, and when compared to something like the 13 Pro Max, you can't deny that the iPhone 13 mini is in-your-face small. And that's because over the past 3 years or so, there's been a general push across the market that have made smartphones larger and larger. I think the craze around folding phones best illustrates that trend in the current space, and to a certain extent, this makes a lot of sense. The more we've grown dependent on our mobile devices for virtually everything, especially for consuming content, having more screen real estate does oftentimes make for a better user experience. It makes things like watching movies and playing games more engaging, especially if you're a power user. All of this feeds into the assumption that a smaller phone equates to a lesser experience, and though I will say that there is some validity to that perspective, I really don't think that applies to the 13 mini. And the main reason for this revolves around the 13 mini's display. Sure, it's only 5.4 inches, but first of all, it's a quality panel, it's a Super Retina XDR OLED display that looks exemplary, And the edge-to-edge design with that signature symmetrical bezel makes it a lot more immersive than what you would think. Whether I'm watching videos on YouTube, playing games, or reading the news on this phone, I've never felt as though my experience was in any way subpar, and mind you, I'm usually using phones that are significantly bigger. Plus, the form factor on the 13 mini provides users with unique benefits that are seriously underrated. This iPhone is by far the most comfortable, as you're able to zoom around iOS one-handed with confidence. It's way less obtrusive when you're putting it into a pocket or bag. I swear, if you're someone who's constantly on the move, who uses their phone a ton, I really think that this is one of the best options for you, mainly because it is so portable and easy to multitask with. Now, this is one of those points that no matter how hard I try and drive, it really won't convince people who are on the fence. The only way to really corroborate what I'm saying is to actually give this phone a fair shot, which honestly, I think most folks will just forego, as they'll probably see it as a hassle. They'll just choose the regular iPhone 13. Again, people tend to choose the path of least resistance when it comes to purchases, and no doubt, the regular 13 is for sure the less riskier buy. But seriously, if you ask anyone who actually bought the 13 mini their thoughts on it, I'd be willing to bet that 8 out of 10 will say that they absolutely love the phone, and they'll probably argue that the benefits that come with its petite size outweigh any of the perceived concessions. But that brings me to the last reason why most people will never buy the iPhone 13 mini. Folks may be fine with the smaller display and maybe even the price, but where they run into a hard stop is going to be battery life. And look, considering that the 13 mini does have the smallest battery compared to its bigger brothers, this is a legitimate concern. Battery life has become one of the most important features to consider when deciding on which phone to go with. We use our phones so much now, even the average consumer is likely relying on their smartphone a lot more than they did even just a few years ago. And with that in mind, I can understand that perceived lack of battery life on the 13 mini being kind of a nail in the coffin for those considering this phone, and I gotta say, a certain amount of that concern is totally warranted. Last year's iPhone 12 mini, as much as I loved it, it didn't have the best battery life. It wasn't awful, and it didn't make the phone unusable by any means, but as I was averaging around 5 hours of screen on time, it definitely wasn't going to win any battery life awards anytime soon. And considering that the form factor hasn't changed much with the 13 mini, it's easy to assume that the battery life challenge still persists on the newer variant. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the 13 mini somehow made a miraculous change when it comes to battery life. There's some clear physical limitations this phone has to deal with, but I will say that no BS, it has gotten noticeably better. Apple actually made the 13 mini slightly thicker to put in a bigger battery, and paired with the improved efficiency with the A15 Bionic, the battery life on this phone has gotten much better. I referenced this in my last review of the iPhone 13 Pro Max, but if you haven't seen this video by Mr. Who's the Boss going over the battery life of all the iPhone 13s, definitely check it out because it's superbly done. But the results show that the new iPhone 13 mini's battery life actually outperforms the regular size iPhone 12s. That's pretty impressive, as I was averaging around 6.5 hours of screen on time during my personal use with the iPhone 12. To have that in this smaller body is quite an improvement, and more than enough power for most consumers to get through a full day of moderate use. Again, it isn't class leading by any means, but I don't want to underplay the gains Apple made here on this phone. It's noticeable in day-to-day use, and all things considered, I would say that the battery life of the 13 mini is actually pretty great. Now, if you're playing a lot of games all the time or filming a ton of 4K video, it still may not be the most ideal phone for you, but there shouldn't be a stereotype about battery life being crap on this phone anymore. It really isn't justified. Now again, if you identify with any of the reasons I went over around why most people won't buy the iPhone 13 mini, it's still likely that none of what I said will change your mind. But man, I've been loving my experience with this phone. I truly think it's the most underrated iPhone available today, and it kind of makes me sad because word on the street is that this will be the last mini iPhone Apple makes for the indefinite future. It apparently just doesn't have enough sales volume to justify its continued production, which again, I can understand. So with that said, this may be your last chance to snag one of these up, so even if you have the remotest of interest, I highly recommend that you at least give it a chance. You always have the option to return it if it's not for you, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how awesome this phone really is. But hey, that's just me, and I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think about the iPhone 13 mini? Let me know if you agree with me and absolutely love it, or if it's still an absolute no-go for you. Hit me up and let me know in the comments down below. Okay, that's about it for this review. Don't forget to leave me a thumbs up if you guys find it useful. Again, I'd really appreciate it. Check out these other reviews if you're looking for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.